When the millionaire CEO walked in and saw the new nanny playing violin for his son, he felt something stir inside him. And it wasn't just the music. But before we dive into the full story, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. Now, subscribe to the channel and let's get started. He had built an empire with his own two hands, yet Maxwell Donovan could not predict how quickly a single moment would overthrow his carefully crafted world. Until recently, his daily life was measured in market shares, board meetings, and the satisfaction of seeing Donovan Enterprises flourish under his watchful eye. Little did he suspect that destiny would place a new nanny in his mansion, someone who would change not just his son's life but also awaken feelings in Maxwell that he thought long buried. On a misty morning, the private car brought this mysterious new nanny to the Donovan estate. Her name was Seren Blake, a woman whose resume spoke of discipline and grace but revealed little of her personal story. With her violin case in hand, Seren emerged from the car, eyes scanning the sprawling manicured gardens that led to the mansion's massive oak doors. Towering pillars framed the entrance and antique windows reflected the early sun. There was a subtle hush to the property, a serene hush as though every statue in the courtyard held its breath for her arrival. Inside, Maxwell's son, Lucas, was slouched on a window seat in the grand foyer, his shoulders heavy with the weight of a sorrow the staff tried not to mention. Before Seren's arrival, the boy had refused lessons of any sort, pushing away tutors and caregivers who offered nothing but polite forms of discipline and cold structure. No one seemed able to break through the walls he'd built after his mother's passing. Maxwell, though wealthy beyond measure, could never find the right words or gestures to bring solace to the child. Surrounded by wealth yet lacking the warmth a family requires, Lucas's loneliness remained a puzzle that nannies after nannies failed to solve. And so, that first morning, Seren made her way into the foyer where father and son waited in uneasy silence. Maxwell maintained his usual composure, an impeccable charcoal suit, hair perfectly groomed, and an expression of unwavering self-command that always served him in negotiations. However, on that day, he felt unsteady. It was not the business side of him that was uncertain. It was the father who felt powerless, confronted by all these unsuccessful attempts to bring light back into his child's world. Lucas clung to a stuffed dog, a relic from happier times, yet the boy's eyes revealed no eagerness, just cautious curiosity. Seren approached and introduced herself softly, setting the violin case down on the marble floor. "Lucas, it's a pleasure to meet you," she said, smiling in a way that showed genuine kindness, rather than a forced demonstration of maternal imitation. Maxwell, arms folded, observed with guarded skepticism. He had read that Seren's background included music therapy and multiple recommendations praising her commitment to children. She was said to be patient, calm, dedicated, exactly the kind of presence that might reach Lucas. But after so many short-lived attempts by others, Maxwell had lost faith in glowing references. He gave Seren a curt nod, standing tall while ignoring the flutter of nerves in his chest. Perhaps Lucas sensed something unique about this nanny, or perhaps it was the peaceful aura Seren projected. Before the silence could become suffocating, the boy glanced at the violin case. His expression changed, just slightly, from hollow disinterest to a flicker of curiosity. Maxwell caught that small shift and felt something inside himself respond with hope and guilt. Had he, in his obsession with success, left his son to endure heartache alone? Seren, as if by instinct, reached for the violin case. She opened it slowly, revealing a beautifully polished instrument. Without a word, she lifted the violin under her chin and prepared the bow. In that moment, the grandeur of the Donovan home seemed to fade into the background. There was only Seren and her violin. A hush fell across the foyer, so profound that one could almost hear the rise and fall of each breath. The melody that followed was gentle, yet brimming with life. It floated through the high ceilings and marble halls, filling the emptiness that had so long resided in that space. Notes soared up the grand staircase, seeped under closed doors, and laced themselves through the crystal chandelier that refracted morning light into tiny rainbows. Lucas's stuffed dog slipped from his arms, and the boy took a slow, almost disbelieving step forward. Meanwhile, Maxwell, who had begun with stiff disapproval, felt his heart inexplicably tighten. The music touched something in him, a corner of his spirit that had grown numb beneath layers of corporate success and grief he couldn't name. Each note Seren coaxed from the strings told a story that words could never convey. It was a lullaby for loss, a promise of hope, and an invitation to dream. Soon Lucas stood at Serene's side, mesmerized. His eyes glistened with an emotion that Maxwell had feared was lost forever: wonder. After the final note lingered in the air, Seren turned to Lucas, and in that gentle hush she whispered something that made the boy smile. Maxwell's chest tightened again. How long had it been since he saw that unguarded smile on his son's face? He felt a twinge of envy. Why had he not been able to provide that relief for Lucas, despite everything he possessed? At the same time, he felt gratitude, and an unexplainable flutter that rose from somewhere beneath his carefully curated composure. He knew in that moment that Seren was no ordinary nanny. Something about her presence, about the sincerity in her gaze and the effortless empathy in her music, hinted at a woman whose secrets ran deeper than her refined skill with the violin. Trying to regain control over his own sudden emotions, Maxwell cleared his throat. "Ms. Blake," he said, struggling to maintain the typical formality of the employer-employee dynamic, "I trust you'll find everything you need for Lucas's lessons. I'll leave you to settle in." He turned on his heel, heading for the study that functioned as his personal command center, the place from which he orchestrated multi-million-dollar deals. But those deals suddenly felt trivial compared to the music he had just heard, and the look on Lucas's face, the dawn of hope. In the corridor, Maxwell paused, letting out a breath he didn't realize he had been holding. Questions swirled in his mind. What if this nanny could heal Lucas's heart? What if, in the process, something else awoke in Maxwell's own chest? He shook off the notion. Business before anything else, he reminded himself. His board, his investors, even his charitable endeavors, these demanded his complete focus. He had no room for daydreams or the illusions of romance, yet no matter how forcefully Maxwell tried to push aside that fleeting spark of warmth, the echo of Seren's violin refused to leave him. It clung to his thoughts, just as it clung to the still air of the mansion. He found himself drawn to the subtle memory of her graceful posture, the sincerity of her eyes, and the surprising calm that spread through him as she played. He told himself it was nothing, a momentary distraction from the avalanche of responsibilities that faced him daily. Outside, the sun rose higher, illuminating the Donovan estate with a near-perfect glow. The staff went about their chores with renewed spirits, each of them having witnessed that magical instant when the new nanny's music penetrated the hush that once lay so heavily over Lucas's sorrow. In quiet corners, the maids whispered rumors of the mesmerizing nanny, while the house chef excitedly planned a welcome lunch to mark Seren's first day. At the very heart of all this was Lucas, feeling a growing flicker of light in his chest after so many months of living in darkness. And at the edges, peering in with curiosity, but holding back his emotions behind steel walls, was Maxwell Donovan, millionaire CEO, father with regrets, and a man who only began to suspect that the walls around his heart might not be as unbreakable as he once believed. The hours after Seren's arrival seemed to carry a hush of anticipation throughout the mansion. Perhaps the sound of her violin still lingered in the air, imprinting its comforting melody into the silent corridors. While the rest of the staff settled into their usual routines, Lucas found himself following Seren around with quiet fascination. He hovered by doorways, peeked from behind furniture, and even stood at the edge of the grand salon whenever she moved through it. like a small planet drawn into her gravity. Inside his office, Maxwell tried to bury himself in work, as always. Summaries of quarterly reports blinked on his computer screen. An entire year of international mergers awaited his signature. A cascade of urgent emails demanded decisions. Yet he could feel his concentration slip every time he remembered the gentle strains of that violin. Occasionally, he would swivel his chair just enough to glance out the tall window that overlooked the garden. The moment he caught a glimpse of Seren guiding Lucas along a hedge or examining a bed of roses with him, Maxwell's heartbeat thudded with an unfamiliar tension. He told himself it was simply relief that Lucas was bonding with someone at last. But that reassurance didn't explain the nervous energy in his chest, nor the questions swirling in his thoughts. Who was Seren Blake, really? How did she acquire such warmth in her presence? A radiance that neither fawned nor intimidated. While he had read her references thoroughly, they were more like footnotes to the complicated enigma he now witnessed, an enigma that both intrigued and unsettled him. "You're getting too invested," he muttered under his breath, annoyed at the crack in his own armor of self-control. Business demanded clarity, cold logic, and he had to remember that her presence was strictly professional. His company's entire future was at stake with upcoming negotiations. He had no time for personal entanglements. Meanwhile, in the house's sunroom, a space that welcomed the mid-morning light through walls of glass, Seren brought out the violin once again for Lucas. This time, she placed the bow in his hands, letting him feel the gentle pressure of its hair across the strings. Lucas's eyes lit up with awe. Though the resulting sound was a squeak, the boy gave a breathless laugh. Seren returned that laugh with a soft smile, carefully guiding his posture and grip. A few more hesitant attempts, and the squeak transformed into a fragile note that wavered, but also signaled possibility. Lucas turned to her with a shy grin. "It's really okay if I try this?" he asked, voice trembling with the fear of failure. Serene nodded, encouraging him. "You can try anything you want," she said. "Every big piece of music starts with a single note." What Seren didn't voice aloud was how she related to his hesitancy. Hidden in her own past were moments of struggle and heartbreak that she channeled through her violin. Music had been her refuge during times when words failed. It was exactly why she had left behind the performing circuit to work with children, particularly those who had lost someone precious. She knew too well that the emptiness of such a loss could swallow a young soul if no gentle hand reached out in time. Not far away, Maxwell paused in the library, scanning for a contract on one of the old mahogany shelves. Hearing a faint echo of giggles, he moved closer to the double doors that opened onto the sunroom. Through the crack, he observed Seren instructing Lucas with unhurried patience. She placed her own hands lightly over the boy's small ones, demonstrating the rhythmic motion of bowing. Maxwell noted how the morning light highlighted the softness of her features and how Lucas looked reborn. The boy's eyes shone, the gloom replaced by curiosity and a budding passion. A tender ache coursed through Maxwell's chest, one he couldn't decipher. He recalled the day, not so long ago, when Lucas had refused to leave his bedroom after his mother's funeral. How Maxwell had knocked quietly, bearing half a dozen expensive gifts to coax the child into normalcy. Yet no toy, no gadget, no fancy trip overseas could pry open the fortress of grief in his son's heart. Maxwell had felt paralyzed, ashamed of the father he couldn't be. But now, witnessing a single morning in Serene's company, he saw more progress than in the entire year he desperately tried to fix things on his own. The sudden realization of that fact shook him. Some part of him felt an instinct to protect Lucas from heartbreak. What if this closeness with Seren was just a temporary salve? But another part of him felt an unfamiliar glimmer of gratitude, even longing. He withdrew from the doorway before they could see him, returning to his library seat. He rubbed his temples, ignoring the printed words on the contracts in his hands. Sleep had eluded him for weeks, and there was a weariness behind his eyes that success and wealth could never soothe. And now, here was a nanny who not only promised to help Lucas, but was beginning to challenge the emotional distance Maxwell had built around himself. A gentle knock startled Maxwell from his thoughts. He straightened his shoulders as the door opened, revealing Seren, still holding the violin by her side. She offered a polite nod. "Mr. Donovan, may I come in?" "Of course," he replied, his tone cooler than he intended. She stepped into the library, glancing around at the endless rows of leather-bound books. "Lucas is taking a short break," she explained, voice laced with quiet excitement. "I hope you don't mind, but we ventured through the rose garden. He asked a lot of questions about the family who lived here before." Maxwell closed the contract he wasn't really reading. "He never shows that much curiosity these days," he remarked, half in awe. "I appreciate all you're doing." Serene acknowledged his gratitude with a modest smile. "He's a bright child, just hurting deeply. He'll be fine, given time and understanding." Her gaze flickered to a photo on the desk, a snapshot of Maxwell, Lucas, and his late wife at a charity event years ago. The child in the photo was so much smaller, wearing a broad grin and holding onto both parents' hands. She remembered reading about the tragedy that had struck this family, about the accident that had left them reeling. Maxwell noticed the direction of her eyes. "I've kept her picture there as a reminder," he said, voice subdued. "Sometimes I wonder if it's more painful for Lucas to see it. Maybe it just reminds him every day that she's not here." Serene listened, feeling his hesitation. "Memories can bring comfort and pain in equal measure," she said softly. "It helps if someone is there to hear the story behind each photograph, to keep the happier moments alive." He cleared his throat, a distant look in his eyes. "Lucas never talks about her. No matter how hard I've tried, he shuts me out." "Perhaps there are things he can't say in words just yet," Seren suggested. "Music can be a path to expressing what's buried. I've found that a violin's notes, or even the act of just gently bowing the strings, can help a child release pent-up feelings." "I appreciate your approach," Maxwell said after a pause. "I've not been the best at dealing with emotional matters myself. I'm trusting you to do what you must for him." His tone was formal, but there was a subtle softness in his eyes. Serene nodded, aware that beneath Maxwell Donovan's polished exterior lay a tangle of guilt and love he didn't quite know how to untangle. "I'll do my best," she promised. "He's already taken to the violin more than I expected. It's as if some corner of him had been waiting for it." Maxwell managed a faint, genuine smile. "Well, if there's anything you need, additional supplies, a better space to practice, just let the staff or me know." The moment felt both intimate and formal, as if they stood at the edge of two different worlds, neither sure how to bridge the gap. Seren offered a small bow of her head, then excused herself to go check on Lucas. Maxwell watched her go, noticing how her footsteps were quiet but purposeful, and how her presence seemed to leave the air charged with something he couldn't quite name. When he was alone again, he resumed flipping through the pages of the contract. But the text blurred, overshadowed by the memory of their conversation. Maxwell suddenly felt the press of responsibilities anew, an avalanche of demands. He was a man who built skyscrapers and orchestrated deals across continents. He had no business feeling this disoriented over a single nanny. And yet his mind traveled back to that fleeting look in Seren's eyes, an empathy so genuine it made him wonder if she too carried hidden scars. Just then, his phone buzzed. A text from his executive assistant reminded him of a conference call in under 10 minutes. He exhaled slowly, gathering his composure and stepping into the role that the world expected of him, the decisive leader, the unstoppable force. But even as he prepared to dominate that high-stakes call, a quiet melody kept playing in his head, The memory of Seren's violin, the flash of Lucas's rare, hopeful smile, and the unsettling notion that for the first time in years, Maxwell wanted something outside the realm of business success, a chance at true connection, both for his son and, perhaps, for himself. Soon after their brief conversation in the library, Maxwell hurried to his study for a critical video conference with international investors. Even as he settled into the leather chair behind his imposing mahogany desk, part of him remained elsewhere, imagining the sight of Lucas, enthralled by a violin, guided by the soft instructions of a woman who seemed to radiate warmth. He tried to push the thought away and focus on the shifting numbers on his laptop screen. The stakes were high. Donovan Enterprises was negotiating a new overseas expansion that promised significant profits, yet also carried risks that made the entire board uneasy. A flicker of guilt tugged at Maxwell's thoughts. While he had always been an expert at juggling complex demands, the question whispered, had he neglected something far more important than any business venture, his own son's well-being? The call commenced, and a lineup of stern-faced executives appeared in separate windows on his screen. They were corporate power brokers from around the globe, all awaiting Maxwell's confident words. He had built his career on unwavering composure. He was the man with all the answers. As Maxwell strategized, responded to pointed questions, and smoothed over concerns, he found an unexpected calm in the memory of Seren's music earlier that day. He was used to battling tension with pure willpower. This time, an image of Lucas's timid smile and the hush of that violin offered a gentler sort of grounding. His voice resonated with unerring authority, guiding the conversation through financial complexities and risk mitigation. When the final handshake was metaphorically exchanged, the deal was set to move forward. Pleased applause filled the conference line, and Maxwell ended the meeting with an efficient nod. Afterwards, he leaned back, eyes closing for a moment as he allowed the adrenaline to recede. The corners of his mouth curved into a slight private smile. If his colleagues could see him now, finding solace not in the numbers, but in that fleeting recollection of a new nanny's violin. He shook his head, perplexed yet strangely content. A soft knock at the door disrupted his reflections. His assistant entered, carrying a sheaf of documents. The man, typically unflappable, wore a hint of surprise on his face. "Sir, the negotiations went extremely smoothly. I assume we'll celebrate, or at least inform the board that everything's on track?" Maxwell nodded, forcing his mind to the present. "Yes, of course. Prepare a statement for the board. Let them know we've mitigated the risk factors. Draft a press release for next week." His assistant lingered, as though sensing Maxwell's unusual distraction. Then, discreetly, the assistant withdrew, leaving Maxwell to gather his papers and thoughts. It was nearing midday, and Maxwell realized, with mild surprise, that he felt a faint urge to see how Lucas was doing. In the past, that duty would have been delegated to whichever caretaker was on staff. He was never one to supervise day-to-day routines. But something had changed. Instead of locking himself away in his study, he strolled through the corridors, reacquainting himself with the mansion. He passed various staff members who greeted him respectfully. Many wore subtle smiles he couldn't quite decipher. Perhaps they had also noticed Lucas's improved spirits. At the far end of the east wing, Maxwell found the door to the music room slightly ajar. It was a space rarely used, containing a grand piano that once belonged to his late wife and a few stands for sheet music. There, he saw Seren and Lucas sitting on the piano bench together. Lucas had the violin balanced on his shoulder while Seren pressed a single piano key, repeatedly giving him a note to match. Lucas, brow furrowed in concentration, drew the bow. The resulting tone was hesitant but nearly aligned with the note she played. With a whoop of excitement, Lucas turned to Seren and they both laughed. It was a sound so genuine that Maxwell felt his throat tighten. He stood in the doorway, observing. Serene noticed him, meeting his gaze with a welcoming nod before turning her attention back to Lucas. "Let's try that one more time," she said. Breathe in gently and release the note slowly. No rush. Lucas inhaled, then glided the bow more gracefully than before. This time the note resonated with surprising clarity. Maxwell found himself clapping softly, prompting Lucas to twist around in delight. "Dad, did you hear that?" "I sure did," Maxwell replied, walking in. "Not bad, champ. You're picking it up quickly." He stopped himself from adding more, uncertain how to proceed. Usually, father-son interactions felt stilted since the loss of Lucas's mother. But now the moment felt natural. Lucas beamed, wide-eyed, as if relieved and proud that his father had witnessed his small triumph. Serene stood, letting father and son share that instant. "He's really a fast learner, Mr. Donovan. We're just starting with fundamental notes, building the basics." Lucas nodded vigorously, hugging the violin to his chest. "She says if I keep practicing, I can learn a simple tune in a few weeks." His voice soared with excitement. Maxwell's heart tugged. It had been too long since his child sounded thrilled about anything besides a fleeting gadget. Even the staff would confirm. Lucas's joy was a rare commodity these days. Serene took a step back, respecting their personal space. "I'll go check if the lunch menu needs adjusting," she suggested gently. "I know Lucas likes simpler meals, mac and cheese or pasta, right?" The boy nodded shyly. "Then I'll speak with the chef." She looked at Maxwell. "Would you like anything special, sir? Perhaps something light after your busy morning?" Caught off guard by her thoughtfulness, Maxwell simply shrugged. "Whatever the chef recommends is fine." He hesitated, then added, "Thank you, Ms. Blake." She offered a kind smile and left, leaving father and son under the watchful glint of sunbeams through the tall windows. Lucas hopped off the bench, carefully placing the violin in its stand. He turned to Maxwell, shifting from excited to uncertain. "Dad, do you really think I can learn to play for real, like Mom did on the piano?" The question struck Maxwell like a spear through the chest. His wife had loved music passionately. The grand piano behind them was her pride and joy. Yet after her passing, neither Maxwell nor Lucas had dared to lay a finger on it, as though the memory was too sacred or too painful to disturb. Maxwell swallowed, stepping closer to the boy. "If that's what you want, I'm sure you can," he answered. "I have no doubt you've got the talent and heart for it." Lucas's eyes flicked to the piano. "Serene said the piano's okay too, if I want to learn that someday." Seeing the boy glance at the instrument awakened Maxwell's own regret. "One step at a time," he said softly, "but I think your mother would be happy to see you finding music again." The child nodded, blinking away the tender emotion. Then, without warning, Lucas wrapped his arms around Maxwell in a rare hug that momentarily robbed the father of breath. Maxwell returned it carefully, as though he might break the fragile bond. Over his son's shoulder, he caught sight of the dust motes dancing in the sunlight, swirling in patterns reminiscent of how quickly life can change. No matter how exhausting or triumphant the business day had been, that simple hug carried more weight than any contract. Maxwell could not remember the last time Lucas had voluntarily shown such an outpouring of affection. The father patted the boy's back, uncertain what to say, but the gesture spoke for itself. In that silent expression of closeness, Maxwell recognized a huge crack in the wall of emotional distance that had separated them. A few moments later, they both parted, slightly awkward but smiling. "Go on then," Maxwell said softly, ruffling Lucas's hair. "Check in with Miss Blake about lunch. I'll be there soon." Lucas scampered off, leaving Maxwell alone with the silent piano. The stillness of the room pressed in around him like a memory half forgotten and half dreamed. He traced a finger over the piano's glossy surface, recalling how his wife's laughter used to mingle with the notes she played. Back then, the house felt lighter, warmer. If only he had realized how fleeting it all could be. A swirl of conflicting emotions seized him. Gratitude for seeing Lucas come alive, sorrow for the past he couldn't reclaim, and a stirring curiosity about Seren, the newcomer whose gentle approach had touched the deepest corners of their sorrow. He wanted to know more about her own experiences that allowed her to connect so easily with children in pain. Yet he reminded himself, she was the nanny, an employee. He had no business prying into her private affairs. Outside, the corridor led to the dining room where a table was set with fresh flowers and meticulously polished silverware. The mansion's routine was continuing, but Maxwell paused beside the piano, gazing at the vacant bench. His mind drifted to those times his wife had asked him to sit next to her while she practiced a new piece, the two of them sharing a melody, both unafraid of mistakes because they were together. He wondered if Lucas might someday fill this empty space with new notes, forging a future that honored the past without being shackled to its pain. At last, Maxwell pulled himself from reverie and left the music room to join his son for lunch. Downstairs, he found Seren and Lucas chatting animatedly about the violin's strings and how they vibrate to create sound. The chef approached, announcing a simplified menu for the boy and something suitably refined for Maxwell, who gave only an absent nod, attention fixed on the glow in Lucas's eyes. During the meal, Maxwell marveled at how calmly Lucas handled conversation with Seren. The boy asked about violins, about whether he might ever play the piano again, even about how musicians traveled the world performing. Seren, answering gently, spoke of countless wonders, never patronizing him. Occasionally, her gaze shifted to Maxwell, and in those moments an unspoken understanding seemed to pass between them. A recognition that Lucas was on a path to healing, and that perhaps they both had roles in guiding him there. After lunch, the staff cleared the plates. Lucas rushed off to show Seren the greenhouse behind the estate, eager to reveal the exotic plants he had grown to love. Maxwell, left in the dining room, watched them go. He finished the last sip of his iced tea, mind swirling with gratitude and a growing sense of caution. He told himself that all he needed was to see Lucas well again. That was the entire purpose of having a nanny with a gift for music. Yet even as he repeated those words in his mind, Maxwell couldn't ignore the subtle thrum of anticipation whenever he imagined crossing paths with Seren once more, or the pang in his chest that whispered perhaps something more than Lucas's healing was beginning in these halls. Afternoon sunlight streamed through the glass ceiling of the greenhouse, illuminating rows of lush greenery and exotic blooms. The air inside was comfortably warm and carried a faint, sweet fragrance of damp earth. This hidden haven was one of Lucas's favorite places on the estate, somewhere he could escape the echoes of the past and, until recently, his own grief. But now he had a companion who seemed genuinely curious about his interests. Seren followed the boy along narrow paths between flowering vines and dwarf fruit trees, occasionally stooping to examine a bud or leaf he pointed out. "We have these weird blue orchids over here," Lucas explained, leading her to a corner brimming with carefully tended blooms. "Mom planted them a long time ago, but the gardener says it was me who reminded her to water them every day." Seren gently brushed a fingertip across one vibrant petal. "They're beautiful," she said, her smile reflecting a mix of wonder and respect. "It's incredible to think how living things can flourish under the right care." Lucas nodded. "Yeah, Dad didn't like the greenhouse much before. I guess he was too busy," he added with a slight frown, as though recalling the father who, not so long ago, was distant and preoccupied. "But maybe he'll come look at it again someday." Seren sensed the boy's wistfulness. She recalled the moment in the music room when Lucas's father had glimpsed his son's accomplishment on the violin and offered that gentle praise. Was this greenhouse yet another place longing for shared memories that never came? "Maybe we can invite him," she suggested gently. "Next time you find a new plant or the orchids bloom again." Lucas seemed to brighten at the thought. Then he grinned mischievously and pointed toward a table laden with clay pots and soil. "Do you like getting your hands dirty, Ms. Blake? We can plant a new seed together. I've got these rare seeds the gardener gave me. He says they grow into huge sunflowers if we're patient." "Sunflowers?" Her face lit with genuine interest. "I'd love to." From her vantage point near the potting bench, Seren watched the boy bustle about, fetching pots, carefully scooping soil, and describing how each seed should be placed. She sensed how wholeheartedly he threw himself into the activity, as though it was a small adventure. It was a glimpse of a child whose natural enthusiasm had been locked away by sorrow for too long. Music had begun unlocking that door, and now something as simple as planting seeds was letting in more light. As they worked, Lucas recounted stories of the greenhouse, how his mother had once shown him how to pollinate flowers by hand, or how occasionally they would bring a battered old radio here and tune into classical music while watering the plants. His eyes grew softer with memory, and Seren's chest tightened at the thought of how grief could mingle with joy in a child's heart. She let him speak, offering only quiet encouragement. At one point, Lucas paused and glanced at her, as though something else weighed on his mind. "Ms. Blake, do you really think music can make sad feelings go away? Sometimes I play a note, but then I remember Mom, and it hurts." Serene carefully set down the seed packet. "Music doesn't always make sadness disappear," she said softly. "But it can help us carry that sadness. When it feels too big inside, letting it out through a note or a song can lighten the burden." She hesitated, choosing her words. "You know, I've had my own sadness before. Playing the violin never erased it, but it gave me somewhere safe to put it." The boy fell silent, studying her face. She rarely spoke about herself, but a sliver of vulnerability showed. "It helped you?" he asked, voice subdued. She nodded. "Yes. It helped me remember that even when life seems dark, there are still melodies, still moments of beauty worth holding on to." She placed a hand gently on his shoulder. "And you have so much beauty inside you, Lucas. I can hear it in every note you play, even if it squeaks sometimes." He smiled at that, his expression a mixture of relief and residual heartbreak. Serene's words seemed to linger in the greenhouse, mingling with the soft rustle of leaves overhead. They resumed potting the sunflower seeds, pressing each one carefully into the soil and adding just enough water. Then, with soil-stained hands, Lucas leaned back on his heels. "Dad's going to be surprised. He doesn't know I'm planting more flowers," he said with a tentative grin. "He'll probably say I should have told him first, but well, it's okay, right?" "Of course it's okay," Seren responded. "He'll be happy to see what you've grown, and if it makes you feel better, we can tell him together." The boy considered that for a moment and shrugged good-naturedly. "You talk to him better than I do, though. He always seems so serious with me." He dusted off his hands, leaving faint smudges on his jeans. "But maybe now that you're here, he'll be less busy." That particular observation tugged at Serene's heart. She was, after all, just the nanny, no matter how kindly Maxwell had treated her so far. She had no power to change the father's schedule or the corporate demands that consumed him. Yet she couldn't deny that her presence might be quietly shifting something in the Donovan household. She thought of how Maxwell's eyes had softened when he caught Lucas playing the violin, how his voice had gentled as he spoke to his son, and, if she admitted it, she recalled that brief moment in the library when their gazes locked and she sensed a deeper current passing between them, an unspoken empathy or curiosity. By late afternoon, Lucas grew tired from the excitement and retreated to his room for a short nap. Seren decided to take advantage of the lull. She had planned to spend her off hours reading by the fountain in the central courtyard, or perhaps exploring the estate's extensive library. Yet something urged her to check in with the staff to ensure the boy's schedule for the week was properly arranged. She wanted to confirm his tutoring times, whether any therapy sessions were recommended, and whether Maxwell had planned family meals. She found the housekeeper, a kindly older woman named Marta, in the hallway leading to the kitchen. Marta offered a conspiratorial smile as Seren approached. "You're doing wonders for that boy, my dear," she said in a hushed voice. "I haven't seen him light up like this since before the tragedy." Seren's cheeks warmed. "He's a special child," she answered softly, "and he's more willing to try new things than he realizes." The housekeeper nodded. "He's not the only one you're helping," she added, eyebrows raised meaningfully. "Mr. Donovan is working in the lounge this afternoon. Usually he keeps to that private study of his, locked away. But I heard him mention wanting to stay closer to the main floor, in case Lucas shows off more violin progress, perhaps." A sly twinkle shone in her eyes. Unsure how to respond, Seren simply smiled politely, feeling her heart stir. She thanked Marta for the update and made her way toward the lounge. Indeed, Maxwell was there, standing by a window, phone in hand, presumably finishing yet another business call. The spacious lounge boasted sumptuous armchairs, a grand fireplace, and a wide bay window that overlooked an expansive lawn. Light draped across the plush rug where Maxwell stood, his posture commanding as usual, yet noticeably more relaxed than when she'd first met him. He ended the call and turned, seemingly sensing her presence. "Ms. Blake," he greeted, tucking his phone into his suit pocket. "How's Lucas?" "He's napping," she replied, stopping a respectable distance away. "We did some planting in the greenhouse. He was quite enthusiastic. I'm trying to think of more activities he might enjoy this week. He mentioned he used to love drawing with his mother." Drawing? Maxwell considered the idea, eyes flickering with an emotion she couldn't quite read. His mother was talented at sketching, especially flowers. Perhaps we have some of her old supplies tucked away. I'll have someone bring them out. "That would be wonderful," Serene said. "I think it might be good for him. A way to explore memories without feeling forced to speak." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "He also asked about you joining us in the greenhouse sometime." At that, Maxwell's composure shifted, just enough for Seren to notice. A faint longing or regret crossed his features. I've never been much of a gardener," he confessed. Then a wry smile tugged at his lips. "But if it encourages Lucas, I'll see what I can do." She nodded. "I believe he'd be thrilled." An unexpected warmth blossomed between them, a shared understanding of the boy's fragile optimism. They stood in silence for a few moments, neither rushing away. The mansion felt strangely tranquil, its usual undertone of formality softened by a shared purpose, helping Lucas reclaim his childhood. Serene was about to excuse herself when Maxwell cleared his throat softly. "You know," he began, gaze drifting to the streaks of late-afternoon sun hitting the rug, "it's been quite some time since the house felt like a home. I just wanted to say that your arrival seems to have sparked something we've been missing." Surprise flickered in Serene's eyes. She dipped her head. "I'm glad if my work is helping Lucas. And you." "Still," Maxwell said, eyes meeting hers, "this is beyond what a typical nanny might do. You've taken on roles I never expected: music teacher, emotional counselor, friend to him." He hesitated, then added in a quieter tone, "I can't remember the last time Lucas wanted me to join him anywhere, or the last time he tried something new with genuine excitement." She heard the unspoken subtext. He's healing, and I'm grateful, but also uncertain what to do next. Serene folded her hands, fighting a faint tremor in her chest. "Sometimes children just need to be seen," she replied gently. "Lucas has a lot to say if we listen." Maxwell's lips pressed into a thoughtful line. "And what about you, Ms. Blake? I realize we've barely discussed your own background. Perhaps sometime I could ask you—" He seemed to catch himself and abruptly shifted to a more formal tone. "I mean, in a professional sense, it might help me understand your methods better." Their eyes locked for a moment. Seren felt a sudden anxiety. a flicker of her own guarded secrets swirling beneath her outward calm. She gave him a polite smile. "Of course, another day, if it's all right with you." He nodded. "Whenever you're comfortable." The moment hung suspended, vibrant yet delicate, until footsteps in the hall signaled the approach of staff. Seren dipped her head in a brief farewell, then stepped away. As she left the lounge, her mind whirled. In Maxwell's presence, she sensed something more stirring, a connection built on mutual concern for Lucas, yes, but also a subtle resonance of two souls each carrying heartbreak in different ways. She had to be cautious, she reminded herself. She was here to help the child, not entangle her life with a powerful CEO whose own sorrow might either bind them or drive them apart. In the corridor's shadows, Maxwell remained still, hands in his pockets, reflecting on the unnerving peace that had settled within him whenever Seren spoke. Part of him yearned to know what lay beneath her poised exterior. Another part warned him that in business, emotions were vulnerabilities, and in personal matters, especially after losing his wife, vulnerabilities could lead to devastating consequences. Yet, the gentle presence of Seren Blake lingered in his thoughts, intertwining with the sweet memory of Lucas's renewed laughter, reminding Maxwell that some risks might be worth taking. He left the lounge, heading toward his study once more, footsteps echoing softly in the mansion's hushed corridors. Outside, the sun dipped lower. Tomorrow loomed with all its complexities, but within these walls, life, so long stalled by grief, was stirring again. Night settled gently on the Donovan estate, draping the grounds in dusky shadows and a tranquil hush. Servants moved silently, lighting sconces along corridors and making final rounds before retreating to their own quarters. In Lucas's room, a bedside lamp cast a warm glow on the walls. At its center, the boy sat cross-legged, scrutinizing the violin bow as Seren fine-tuned the instrument on his lap. "I've never practiced at night," Lucas confessed, eyes flicking between Serene's calm hands and the shadows dancing on the ceiling. "It feels different." Seren smiled softly. "Sometimes when the house is quiet, you can hear each note more clearly. It's like the whole world is listening." She brushed the bow across the strings lightly, producing a low, gentle hum. "We won't do much tonight, just a few minutes to help your muscles remember." Lucas nodded, setting the violin beneath his chin. His small fingers trembled a bit. Seren noticed and placed her hand over his wrist. "Slowly," she reminded him, "and if you squeak, that's okay. We learn best by mistakes." The first note emerged uncertain, wavering across the stillness. Yet Lucas steadied his arm, exhaling as Seren had taught. The next attempt blossomed clearer, a fragile melody testing the limits of silence. For a few moments, time seemed to stop, save for that soft resonance lingering in the dimly lit room. It was in this hushed space, just as Lucas let the bow rest, that Maxwell appeared at the threshold. He knocked lightly on the open door, and Lucas lifted his head. "Dad," he said, with a faint smile. "We were just practicing." Maxwell stepped inside. He looked from Lucas to Seren with a gentle pride in his gaze. "I heard a few notes from the hallway. Sounded promising." Truth be told, Maxwell had closed his laptop and followed that faint melody upstairs, drawn by curiosity, and something else he didn't dare name. Lucas glanced at Seren, then back at his father. "We're done for tonight, I guess. Maybe tomorrow I'll try that little tune." He slid the violin back in its case, carefully. Maxwell ruffled the boy's hair, voice low. "It's late, champ, and you've had a full day. Gardening, violin, everything." Seren offered Lucas a reassuring smile. "Keep your hands relaxed so they don't get stiff. Tomorrow, we'll see if you can hold a few notes in a row. Deal?" "Deal," Lucas replied, looking more at ease than Maxwell could remember. The boy gave a quick wave to both, then climbed into bed, hugging the stuffed dog he still couldn't sleep without. Serene and Maxwell eased out of the room, flipping off the main light. A soft glow remained from the bedside lamp, which would keep Lucas company until he drifted off. Out in the corridor, an unspoken hush lingered. Maxwell cleared his throat, nodding towards a less frequented wing of the mansion. "Sometimes I walk the gallery halls at night," he said. He paused, feeling awkward. "I was wondering if you'd like to see them. There are some old paintings of the family, Lucas's mother included." Seren studied his expression. This invitation was clearly important to him, and though she was still in her work attire, soft slacks and a collared blouse, she sensed this was more than a casual tour. It felt like a quiet gesture of trust. "Yes," she answered, voice gentle. "I'd be honored." They walked side by side, the sound of their footsteps muffled on plush carpeting. The corridor lights were dimmed for the night, creating a subdued ambiance that highlighted the gilded frames on the walls. Portraits of past Donovans stared out, some proud in Victorian garb, others more modern, capturing philanthropic gestures or triumphant moments in business. At one corner, a large painting depicting Maxwell's grandfather fishing in a distant lake seemed to watch them pass. "She was the artist in the family," Maxwell said suddenly, stopping before a smaller portrait. He motioned to the signature scrawled at the bottom, "M. Donovan." The painting itself was an impressionistic swirl of flowers and light, full of quiet joy. Melissa painted this a few months before Lucas was born. She insisted on capturing the feeling of the greenhouse, rather than just its likeness. Seren stepped closer, gazing at the soft brushstrokes. Warm pinks, greens and purples melded together, reminiscent of a gentle dream. "It's beautiful, full of life." She could almost hear the hush of flowers growing, the promise of new beginnings. Maxwell's brow furrowed, shadows playing across his features. She wanted to do an entire series, but after Lucas was born, things got busy. Her health, well, she was fine until... He halted, swallowing the rest of that sentence. Seren studied him gently. She didn't press, waiting to see if he'd continue. After a moment, Maxwell sighed, turning to face the painting again. "I try not to dwell on that day," he said. "The accident. It was a rainy afternoon. One minute she was driving back from a meeting with a charity group, the next..." His voice caught. "I've replayed it in my mind so many times, thinking I should have done something different. Kept her from going, rerouted her. But fate..." He shook his head. His pause lingered. Outside, a breeze stirred through the estate's outer courtyards, rattling a window pane somewhere in the distance. In that subdued corridor, Seren felt a pang of empathy. She could almost sense the weight of his guilt, pressing against him as tangibly as the sorrow Lucas carried. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "Sometimes we blame ourselves, but tragedies often come without reason or fault." He nodded slowly, pressing a hand to his temple. "I know. Rationally, I know. But logic doesn't fix regret. And Lucas, he hasn't truly spoken about her loss. He acts like if he never mentions her, then maybe the pain won't be real." Seren thought of the child's hopeful eyes earlier, the moments he shared about his mom while planting seeds. "He does talk about her in bits and pieces," she said gently, "but perhaps he worries he'll upset you, or that once he starts talking he won't be able to stop." Maxwell's gaze flicked to her, a swirl of emotions running deep. "I suppose I haven't given him much confidence that I can handle it," he admitted, voice thick. "I used to think that burying grief under work would keep us both functioning, but seeing him come alive with your music lessons, it's opened my eyes to what I was missing." Seren rested her hand against the back of the painting's frame as if absorbing the memory within. "Music is only part of it," she said softly. "Lucas needed to see that healing doesn't betray his mother. It honors her. It's possible to miss her deeply and still find joy in the present." For a long moment, Maxwell said nothing, just stood there with eyes that betrayed gratitude, guilt, and something else. An unnamed longing. At last he gestured for them to continue along the hall. They passed a few more paintings, some landscapes Melissa had adored, others commissioned works from local artists. Eventually, they reached a tall window overlooking a moonlit courtyard. The moon cast silver reflections on the manicured hedges below. Maxwell exhaled, slipping his hands into his trouser pockets. "You know, this place can feel like a mausoleum at night," he admitted, with every echo reminding me of what's gone. Serene looked out too, noticing how peaceful the courtyard appeared under the lunar glow. "Yet I think it's also full of possibilities," she murmured. "Look at Lucas. He's turning corners every day. Maybe the house can, too." Maxwell's lips curved into a faint smile. "You say that with such certainty. I've seen children find their way through darkness. Adults, too," she replied, her voice steady but tinged with a hint of personal reflection. "We have to let light in, sometimes little by little." His eyes flicked to her again. "Yes, well, I'm trying. For Lucas, and maybe for myself." A wry note crept into his tone, as though he was almost surprised by his own vulnerability. In the ambient silence, Serene felt her heart quicken, confronted by the quiet intimacy of the moment. The corridor, the moonlit courtyard, and Maxwell Donovan, haunted yet hopeful. She realized how easy it would be to step over a line, to let sympathy and closeness become something more. She was here as a professional caregiver for his son, yet the more she witnessed Maxwell's earnest struggle, the more she sensed an undeniable pull of empathy that occasionally resembled attraction. She tore her gaze from the moonlit scene and turned back to him. "It's late," she said, striving for a gentle, practical tone. "And Lucas will be up early for another practice session." Maxwell nodded, shoulders squaring. "Yes, of course. I'll walk you back to your quarters. The staff likely have left everything you need." They strolled quietly, passing more portraits that gazed at them with silent eyes. The mansion's hush pressed in, broken only by the soft sounds of their footsteps. When they arrived at the door of the suite set aside for Serene, Maxwell hesitated. She placed her hand on the doorknob, turning to him with a polite but warm smile. "Good night, Mr. Donovan," she said, "and thank you for showing me that gallery. Your wife was clearly an artist who painted with her heart." He looked down for a moment, the mention of Melissa's name evoking both sadness and appreciation. "Thank you for not letting her be forgotten," he replied, voice subdued. "Sleep well, Ms. Blake." Serene slipped inside, closing the door softly behind her. She leaned against it for a moment, exhaling as though she'd been holding her breath for too long. The day's events whirled in her mind. Lucas's hopeful progress, the gentle nighttime practice, Maxwell's revelations about regret, and the poignant moonlit tour of Melissa's art. She felt a pang, recalling how she'd come here intending only to focus on the child's needs. Yet in the short time since her arrival, she found herself woven into a deeper tapestry, one of loss, love, and unspoken hopes. Over in his own private wing, Maxwell walked back through the corridors, passing the now darkened portraits. With each step, he considered how this newcomer, this quiet, empathetic Nanny, had managed not just to reach Lucas but to stir something within him as well. The thought filled him with both reassurance and alarm. Perhaps in the morning light he would remind himself of boundaries and obligations, but for now, with the moon high and the household asleep, he allowed himself to imagine a future where the quiet hush of grief might be replaced by softer, happier notes. Finally reaching his bedroom, Maxwell removed his jacket and tie, setting them aside. The silence felt more companionable than lonely this time, as though the memory of Serene's voice lingered in the air, gently promising a tomorrow worth waking up to. He switched off the lamp, letting darkness envelop the room, and for the first time in what seemed like ages, drifted off with a small seed of peace where despair once reigned. Dawn brought a soft glow through the high windows of the Donovan estate. Though sunrise was still a gentle promise on the horizon, the household began to stir in its routine. Staff quietly moved about, ensuring the day's schedule remained seamless. In the spare bedroom turned practice space, Seren laid out a fresh set of violin exercises on a small stand, anticipating Lucas's morning enthusiasm. Shortly after, the boy arrived, eyes still heavy with sleep but bright with anticipation. He rubbed his face, murmuring a drowsy greeting. "Good morning, Ms. Blake. I'm ready." Despite the early hour, he gently lifted the violin, posture improving each day under Seren's guidance. "Morning, Lucas," Seren answered with a warm smile. "Let's begin with some easy bow movements. Try not to press too hard, just warm up slowly." Lucas obeyed, drawing the bow across the strings and creating a deliberate, steady tone. Within minutes, the uncertain squeaks he'd produced days ago were replaced by a cleaner, mellower sound. His progress was tangible, especially when Seren reminded him to pause, inhale, and exhale with each move of the bow. Their quiet focus turned the small bedroom into a world of shared concentration, student and teacher forging a path forward. Suddenly, the door cracked open. Maxwell stood there with a half-smile, sleeves rolled up. "I could hear the music from down the hall," he said by way of greeting. "I thought I'd see how the morning lesson is going." He strode in, glancing between Lucas's intent expression and Serene's encouraging nod. Lucas lowered the violin, cheeks coloring with pride. "Dad, I'm getting better at not squeaking," he announced. "Listen." He raised the instrument again, producing a short but sweet phrase, a series of long notes that surprisingly flowed together. It was far from perfect, yet also a clear sign of growth. Maxwell nodded appreciatively. "I can tell. That's wonderful, son." His voice bore genuine admiration. Then, shifting his gaze to Seren, he added, "Thank you for how you managed to make these lessons both fun and disciplined. It's not a small feat." Seren offered a modest tilt of her head. "Lucas is the one doing the real work," she said lightly. "I'm just guiding him." "Still," Maxwell said, "this guidance is invaluable." He glanced at his watch. "I actually have a fairly light morning. No calls until mid-afternoon. So if the two of you aren't busy, I thought maybe we could all share breakfast. Perhaps in the courtyard. The weather looks nice." Lucas looked to Seren, excitement in his eyes. "Please, can we?" It was as if the simple act of having a meal with his father felt like a special occasion. Seren, equally surprised and touched by Maxwell's initiative, nodded. "Certainly, if you'd like." So it was that half an hour later, they found themselves at a small wrought-iron table set amidst a garden courtyard near the east wing. Sunlight glimmered off a small fountain while lush hedges offered a sense of privacy. The estate's chef had prepared a spread more casual than formal. Fresh squeezed juice, seasonal fruit, scrambled eggs, and a small platter of pastries that made Lucas's eyes light up. As they sat, a gentle morning breeze ruffled the tablecloth. Lucas dove happily into his breakfast, mouth full of praise for the flaky croissants. Maxwell, in contrast, sipped black coffee, occasionally sneaking glances at his son, astonished at how engaged the boy was. Between bites, Lucas talked about how he hoped to learn a short tune within the week, something he could maybe play at dinner to surprise the staff, or perhaps even show his father in the evenings. "You're unstoppable," Maxwell teased, eyebrows raised. "A few days in and you're ready for a recital?" Lucas just shrugged, a playful grin dimpling his cheeks. "Seren says practice is everything. Besides, the squeaks aren't as scary as I thought." Seren dabbed at her napkin, smiling at Lucas's budding confidence. "He's practicing very diligently. If he keeps it up, a simple tune might be possible in another week or two." Maxwell turned that thoughtful gaze toward Seren. "When I was Lucas's age, I don't remember being this passionate about anything, let alone music. Seeing him so alive, it's good." He paused, carefully choosing his words. "I really do appreciate what you're doing for him, and for me, indirectly." A fleeting warmth rose in Seren's chest. She noticed how Maxwell's expression softened whenever he acknowledged Lucas's progress. It was as though, behind the stoic businessman facade, there resided a father longing to be more present, more involved in his child's world. The thought made her heart twinge with empathy. Lucas was too busy savoring a chocolate pastry to catch the delicate emotional exchange. But the moment of unspoken understanding between Maxwell and Seren lingered as the morning sun grew brighter. Shortly after they finished breakfast, the boy rushed off to show a staff member the new planting he'd done in the greenhouse the previous day. Maxwell stayed behind, seemingly in no hurry to depart. Serene began stacking the plates to help out of habit, but Maxwell waved her off. "The staff will handle it," he said, then added with a faint smile, "You're a guest here too, in your own right." Seren carefully set the plates back. "Sometimes it's hard to break certain habits," she admitted. "I'm used to being of service wherever I go." He folded his arms, leaning back in his chair. "What about your own life? You must have some dreams or pursuits outside of helping families." For a brief second, Seren felt exposed, her pulse quickening. She considered deflecting, but Maxwell's tone was gentle, not prying. Maybe it was the fresh air or the success of the morning violin practice that made her speak more openly than usual. "I used to perform," she began, choosing her words carefully. "Violin, in a small ensemble. For a while, I thought it would be my path forever, concerts, traveling. But sometimes circumstances change, and we have to adapt." He nodded slowly, not pushing for details she didn't offer. "Does it hurt to give it up?" A soft sadness flickered in her eyes. "At times, but I realized I found more fulfillment sharing music's healing power one-on-one, especially with children. That's how I ended up as, well, a sort of music therapist." She shrugged. "Though I never officially took that title, the work is much the same." Maxwell's stare was introspective, as though measuring the cost she might have paid. "I see. Well, I can only speak for Lucas, but it seems you made the right choice, for him at least." She offered a small, genuine smile. "Thank you." Silence lingered, but it was a comfortable one. The fountain's gentle trickle mingled with distant birdsong. Finally, Maxwell glanced at his watch. "I have a short window before my next set of calls. Maybe I'll see how the orchard is faring. We rarely go there anymore, but it used to be full of apple trees my grandfather planted." He hesitated. "Would you care to join me? Or I understand if you need to prepare for Lucas's next session." Seren weighed the invitation. It felt personal, more a stroll between colleagues or even friends than a nanny and employer. Yet something in her yearned to say yes. "I think Lucas might be busy in the greenhouse for a bit. I can spare a moment if you don't mind." And so they walked side by side along a path that led away from the manicured lawns into a slightly more rustic section of the property. Tall, mature apple trees stretched in tidy rows, their branches swaying in the breeze, leaves glistening. The orchard was quiet, dotted with sunlight and the occasional rustle of small creatures in the undergrowth. "It's lovely here," Seren murmured. She placed a hand on a low-hanging branch, brushing her fingertips against a cluster of still green apples. "I didn't even realize the estate had an orchard." Maxwell nodded, a nostalgic glint in his eyes. "It was once my grandfather's pride. We used to hold small harvest festivals here back when the family was more united." He paused, choosing his next words. "After Melissa passed, I rarely had the heart to come down. Life got consumed by my business expansions and, well, everything else." They walked deeper among the trees, the path dappled with sunlight. The conversation that followed was subdued yet earnest. Maxwell spoke of his grandparents' legacy, how the estate had shaped his childhood. Seren responded with little insights about her own upbringing in a more modest home. how music had been the only constant as she moved between communities with her parents. There was no forced intimacy, just two people sharing fragments of personal history beneath a canopy of rustling leaves. Eventually, they reached a clearing where a small wooden bench sat facing a row of aged apple trees. Maxwell gestured for Seren to sit, then joined her. The hush of nature enveloped them. She was acutely aware of how close they were. An accidental nudge could bring their shoulders together. Though an invisible boundary remained, it felt thinner now, softened by mutual respect and the gentle swell of understanding. "I can't recall the last time I had this kind of peaceful moment," Maxwell remarked quietly. "Usually my mind is racing with stock reports, partnership deals, or the next crisis at headquarters." Seren smiled sympathetically. "Everyone deserves moments of quiet, even corporate titans." He chuckled softly, leaning forward to rest his elbows on his knees. "I'm far from a titan, despite what some business magazines claim." A breeze caught his hair. He turned, catching her gaze with a sincerity that flickered in his steel-blue eyes. "It's odd, allowing myself to slow down, especially with a stranger. Yet you don't feel like a stranger anymore." Serene's heart tapped an extra beat. She hesitated, wanting to stay grounded. "We share a goal, Mr. Donovan. Helping Lucas. That's enough to unite people quickly." Her voice was soothing, though something in her chest fluttered at his admission. He nodded in agreement, though the look he gave her suggested more thoughts lay unspoken. For a moment it seemed as if Maxwell might press further, ask more about the burdens she hinted at. But then, faint voices carried from beyond the orchard, staff calling each other, likely preparing for midday tasks. Reality beckoned. Maxwell rose from the bench with a sigh, offering Seren a hand. She accepted it, and their palms met, warm, firm, a quiet spark passing between them. Once she stood, they parted politely, stepping back into their respective roles. Without another word, they walked side by side back toward the main house, a silent understanding woven between them. As they neared the formal lawns, Maxwell checked his phone, scowling slightly. "I'm late for the next meeting," he muttered. Then, with a softer glance her way, he added, "Thank you for indulging this orchard detour. It's helpful, reconnecting with certain places." Seren smiled, tucking a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "I enjoyed it, and I'm sure the orchard appreciated your visit too." A small laugh followed, easing the moment's gravity. He nodded once more, then strode off toward his office, phone already to his ear. Seren lingered, watching him go, feeling both the warmth of the orchard sunlight and the subtle weight of the connection forming between them. Carefully, she reminded herself that her purpose here was Lucas, not her own heart's yearnings. Still, she couldn't deny that Maxwell Donovan was no longer just an aloof figure behind a corporate empire. He was a grieving father, a man finding his way back to living, and she was becoming an integral part of that process. Turning, Seren headed into the house to check on her young pupil. She resolved that no matter the personal stirrings in her chest, the boy's well-being remained her top priority. Yet as she walked, she felt her own heart quietly reminding her that sometimes caring for one soul can gently bind you to another, and that perhaps there was a path toward healing for them all under the estate's ever-watchful skies. A few days passed, each one layering small yet significant changes throughout the Donovan estate. Lucas grew more confident with his violin practice, mastering simple patterns of notes that once sounded impossible to him. His enthusiasm spilled beyond music. He asked questions about painting, rummaged through old art supplies once belonging to his late mother, and begged for extra time in the greenhouse to see how his newly planted seeds were sprouting. Seren, for her part, discovered a gentle rhythm in caring for the boy. Their routine was built on trust and patient exploration. Mornings were for violin warm-ups or short lessons. Afternoons were dedicated to studies or leisure activities, and evenings sometimes found them reading storybooks in a quiet corner or taking a slow walk through the corridors so Lucas could show her every nook and cranny of his sprawling home. The house staff, once so formal and measured, now seemed to bubble with discreet admiration for the bright transformation in the household's atmosphere. Maxwell observed these shifts from various vantage points, divided as he was between fatherhood and the unrelenting demands of his corporate life. His conferences continued with a relentless pace. Phone calls, legal documents, negotiations with international partners, yet more and more he found himself stepping away for small moments, to hear Lucas attempt a new melody, to join an impromptu lunch with Seren and his son, or even to walk aimlessly through the orchard as a midday respite. One late afternoon, after Lucas had completed a particularly good session on the violin, Seren sent him to wash up while she put away the instrument. She lingered in the music room tidying loose sheets of practice notes when Maxwell entered, tie loosened, face lined with fatigue. "He did quite well today, didn't he?" Maxwell asked, scanning the neatly stacked pages of exercises. "I heard those notes from the hall. He's controlling his bow more steadily." Seren nodded, pleased pride shining in her eyes. "Yes, he's starting to feel comfortable with the basics. Another week or two and he'll have a simple tune fully under his belt." Maxwell let out a weary sigh, running a hand through his hair. "In all honesty, hearing him play even a small sequence is like a revelation. I've spent so long trying and failing to spark any real joy in him. You come along with a violin, and suddenly he's discovering life again." "He was always capable," Seren replied gently, closing the violin case. "Sometimes children just need the right door opened. Music happened to be that door." For a moment neither spoke. The hush of the music room, accented by golden light from the tall windows, felt thick with unspoken thoughts. Then Maxwell straightened, as though reminding himself of an obligation. "I'm hosting a small charity gala here at the house next weekend. It's an annual event. My late wife spearheaded it to raise funds for youth arts programs. I've continued it in her name." He paused, swallowing. "This year feels unusual. I nearly canceled it but realized she would have wanted it to go on." Serene tilted her head with soft empathy. "A charity gala? That sounds like a wonderful tribute to your wife." He nodded, though he looked pensive. "It's also a reminder of what we lost. In previous years, we always planned it together. Now it falls on me. The staff helps, of course, but it's different. I was wondering—" He hesitated, meeting Seren's gaze. "Would you be comfortable attending? Not just as Lucas's nanny, but as a guest. You've done so much for us and, well, I'd like you there, to see the outcome of the cause you're so naturally part of." Surprise flickered across her face. She recalled her background in small performances, but never had she attended a large, high-society function like one would expect in the Donovan mansion. Part of her felt wary. She was here as an employee, after all. Yet Maxwell's invitation carried a sincerity she couldn't dismiss. "I'd be honored," she said at last, voice measured. "If you truly think it's appropriate." "I do," Maxwell affirmed. "You and Lucas might even collaborate on a tiny musical piece for the event if he's ready. Nothing too formal, just a demonstration of the power of music for children." A hint of a smile touched his lips, but no pressure. "I don't want him to feel overwhelmed." Serene's eyes brightened at the idea. "We'll see how comfortable he feels in the coming days. It could be a simple piece. He could even just hold a note while I accompany him. It might help him realize his progress." Maxwell exhaled, relief blending with anticipation. "Thank you. Truly." They parted ways to resume their daily tasks, each carrying the quiet excitement and trepidation of the upcoming gala. Over the subsequent days, the mansion buzzed with behind-the-scenes preparations. Caterers came to finalize menus, decorators arrived to place fresh floral arrangements, housekeeping staff meticulously polished every surface, and technicians tested lighting setups in the main ballroom. It was a whirlwind of activity, one that both enthralled and slightly unnerved Lucas, who had never seen the estate so alive with strangers bustling in and out. Seren carefully balanced the boy's routine so he wouldn't feel neglected or overshadowed by the event. She made their practice sessions shorter but more focused, ensuring that any potential cameo performance at the gala would be a positive experience. Sometimes Maxwell would slip into the music room or the side lounge to catch glimpses of these sessions. Whenever Seren noticed him, she offered a small nod or smile, a tacit acknowledgement of their shared goal, helping Lucas shine, if only for a brief moment, in front of an audience that might represent a new beginning. One evening, while Lucas was already asleep, Seren lingered in the grand foyer, watching the staff roll out a deep red carpet for the main entrance. The overhead chandelier cast sparkling lights across the marble floor, creating an almost magical aura. She stepped aside to avoid interrupting their work, but as she did, she nearly bumped into Maxwell rounding the corner. "Careful," he said softly, steadying her with a hand on her elbow. They stood momentarily in front of the arched doors, the outside night as dark as ink. "I was just making sure everything is on schedule. Seems the team is working overtime to get it perfect." Seren glanced at his hand on her elbow, noticing again that sense of closeness that had grown between them, woven through daily interactions and shared devotion to Lucas. She cleared her throat gently. "It'll be a lovely event, I'm sure. All these preparations. I never realized how massive an undertaking a gala could be." He slipped his hand away, returning it to his side with a faint, self-conscious movement. "Yes, it's quite something. My wife built it up over the years. It was small at first, just a dozen or so donors, but it's grown into a significant fundraiser." A sadness flitted across his features. "I'm determined to keep her vision alive, for the sake of the arts, and for her memory." "She'd be proud of you," Seren offered quietly. "I don't know her story in full, but from what you and Lucas have shared, she cared deeply about bringing music and art to children. This gala is part of that legacy." Maxwell's gaze turned intense for a moment, as though her words touched a vulnerable spot. "I can only hope," he said softly. Then, regaining a bit of composure, he added, "And you'll be there, helping show the donors firsthand how music can change a child's life. Even if it's just a small demonstration, it might inspire them to give more generously." Seren's cheeks warmed slightly. "Yes. If Lucas is ready, I'll stand beside him. He won't have to face it alone." They stood in amicable silence, the swirl of staff around them completing tasks, oblivious to the quiet exchange by the door. From across the foyer, Marta, the housekeeper, offered them a discreet smile before disappearing down a corridor. She, like several other employees, had noticed the subtle closeness growing between the formidable CEO and the thoughtful Nanny. At length, Maxwell nodded toward the sweeping staircase. "It's late, and we should all get some rest before tomorrow's final rehearsals, so to speak. If you need anything, let the staff know, or—" He paused, looking almost uncertain. "Or come find me." Serene inclined her head. "Of course. Good night, Mr. Donovan." "Good night, Ms. Blake." She moved toward the side hall leading to her quarters, while Maxwell made his way back to the main corridor. Both carried a hush of anticipation in their hearts. The gala was just days away, promising a moment that could usher new light into Lucas's life, and perhaps cast new shadows or revelations on the growing bond between father and Nanny. Upstairs, Lucas slept soundly, unaware of the complexities swirling in adult minds. But come the weekend, when the mansion lit up with music, chatter, and formal attire, he would step onto a small stage of his own, buoyed by Seren's guidance and his father's hopeful gaze, and maybe, in that shared spotlight, they'd all find a measure of healing none of them had expected. The day of the charity gala arrived in a swirl of final details and mounting excitement. From the early hours, the mansion seemed to vibrate with purpose. Florists arranging the last bouquet, caterers organizing hors d'oeuvres on gleaming silver trays, musicians fine-tuning their instruments in the grand ballroom, rich fabrics draped tables laden with silent auction items, each donation earmarked to support youth arts programs that had once been Melissa Donovan's heartfelt passion. Lucas woke with butterflies in his stomach. Seren found him in the music room, anxiously fingering the violin strings. His dress clothes, a tailored suit in miniature form, were draped over a nearby chair, waiting for the evening. "It's normal to be nervous," she assured him, setting a gentle hand on his shoulder. "And remember, we only play if you feel ready. No one's forcing you." He took a deep breath. "I do want to play," he admitted, glancing at the pages of sheet music they had practiced. It was a simple tune, just enough to show how far he'd come. "I keep thinking maybe Mom would have liked me doing this." "She would," Seren said softly. "She loved music. From everything I've heard, this gala was one of her favorite nights of the year because it helped kids discover music just like you're doing." The tenderness in her voice offered Lucas the reassurance he needed. In another part of the estate, Maxwell oversaw the finishing touches on the gala layout. He stood in the ballroom, dressed in a crisp tuxedo, conferring with the event coordinator. Large windows opened to a terrace where cocktail tables awaited guests. Soft, elegant lighting curved along the walls, illuminating the archways and casting a gentle glow on framed photographs of past youth arts initiatives. This year, Maxwell had added a dedicated area showing the estate's own efforts. Pictures of Lucas planting flowers, practicing violin, even a candid shot of him smiling in the greenhouse. The coordinator had been charmed by the personal touch, convinced it would move donors to give generously. A murmur among the staff announced the first arrivals. An assortment of high-profile guests began stepping onto the red carpet in the foyer, greeted by attentive attendants. Ties and gowns shimmered in the chandelier's light, and a pleasant hum of conversation filled the air. Maxwell exchanged polite handshakes and welcoming remarks, ever the polished host. Yet he felt a twinge of anticipation whenever he glanced toward the staircase, half expecting to see Lucas or Seren appear at any moment. Eventually, he excused himself from the throng to find them, weaving through the carefully arranged throngs of guests. He passed a mirrored hallway and spotted himself in reflection, hair impeccably styled, expression composed yet slightly tense. Had it really been a year since the last gala? That event had been so overshadowed by grief and confusion that he barely recalled it. Now, ironically, he felt a stirring of hope alongside the sorrow. Perhaps that was the real tribute to Melissa, carrying on her work with a renewed sense of purpose. Maxwell found Lucas in a side room, practicing a few final notes on the violin while Seren stood beside him in an elegant yet understated evening dress. The sight momentarily stole Maxwell's breath. He had never seen her out of her usual day-to-day attire, nothing flashy, but the fluid lines of the gown and the soft way her hair was pinned up made her appear almost ethereal. Lucas, in his little suit, looked both dashing and anxious. "You both look wonderful," Maxwell said, voice warm as he approached. "And how's our musician faring?" Lucas swallowed hard, but managed a grin. "I think I'm okay. My fingers feel slippery, though." "You'll do fine," Serene reassured him, offering a slight smile to Maxwell. She noticed he carried his own aura of refined poise tonight, handsome in the classic sense, though the weariness behind his eyes hinted at the memories this gala stirred. "I'll stay beside him on stage, just in case," she added. "Of course," Maxwell said, lifting Lucas's violin case to escort them. "Guests are already arriving, but the official program won't start for another hour. We can slip in a few more practice runs if you'd like, or just settle your nerves, whichever you prefer." Lucas nodded, inhaling deeply. "Let's go find a quiet spot, Ms. Blake. Just one last time." They made their way toward a smaller lounge adjacent to the ballroom, a space mostly used for staff breaks during big events. In the privacy of that quiet corner, Lucas stood with Seren, softly playing through his piece. The notes were hesitant at first, but steadied under her calm presence. Maxwell watched, heart in his throat. Each successful phrase felt like a step in a shared journey, one from darkness toward light, from isolation toward trust. Soon the hour approached. Maxwell was called to the front of the ballroom to greet the attendees. He introduced the gala's purpose, honored the late Melissa Donovan, and spoke briefly of how the funds raised would bring art and music to children without access to such opportunities. As applause washed over him, Maxwell glanced at Lucas and Seren near the side of the stage. The boy's eyes shone with a mixture of nerves and resolve. "And now," Maxwell announced, clearing the mild tremor in his voice, "I'd like to share a small demonstration. My son, Lucas, has recently found a passion for music, guided by a remarkable teacher, Ms. Seren Blake. If you'll indulge us, he'd like to play a short tune to show how art can transform a child's spirit." Polite curiosity rippled across the crowd. Seren gently guided Lucas to the center of the stage, violin in hand. As Maxwell stepped aside, the boy took position, lifting the instrument beneath his chin. Seren stood behind him, poised to accompany on a second violin she'd borrowed for the occasion. For a tense second, Lucas looked ready to flee, but then his gaze locked on his father's encouraging nod, and he steadied himself. The opening note emerged trembling, uncertain. Serene's bow joined his in a gentle harmony, guiding him through the melody they had rehearsed. Within moments, the trembling gave way to a fragile but growing confidence. A simple tune, nothing grand, yet in that grand ballroom it resonated with quiet purity. Each note seemed to carry a story, a child learning to trust again, a father witnessing rebirth, and a nanny whose caring heart wove it all together. When Lucas landed on the final note, the hush of the crowd shattered into warm applause. Some guests rose from their seats, clapping with genuine delight. Lucas turned red, beaming in a way that Maxwell had yearned to see for so long. He quickly bowed, while Seren offered a graceful nod, pride lighting her eyes. Maxwell stepped back up, placing a hand on Lucas's shoulder. He spoke quietly into the microphone. "As you can see, arts education doesn't just teach skills, it awakens possibilities. My deepest thanks to everyone who contributes to tonight's cause. You're ensuring more children can experience what Lucas just did." Another wave of applause. They left the stage amid appreciative murmurs and soft congratulations. Once behind the curtain, Lucas exhaled in a rush, leaning into Serene's side. "I did it," he whispered with amazement. "I didn't squeak too much." "You were amazing," Seren assured him with a gleaming smile. "I'm so proud of you." Maxwell crouched slightly, face radiating paternal joy. "Lucas, you were brave up there. Your mother would be so proud. Thank you for sharing that with everyone." He wrapped an arm around Lucas's shoulders, then glanced at Seren, their eyes meeting in a mutual understanding that transcended words. She had guided his son to this moment of triumph. Maxwell's gratitude ran deeper than any applause could convey. As the gala program continued with speeches and announcements, Lucas and Seren found a quieter corner to decompress. Guests approached with warm words, some praising Lucas's poise, others commending Seren's skillful guidance. A few recognized Maxwell's personal transformation. The boy, though shy at first, soon realized he loved the positive attention, especially when he heard that his performance might inspire extra donations for the cause. Late into the evening, while the ballroom buzzed with conversations, Maxwell, Seren, and Lucas congregated near a table decorated with photographs from past galas. A picture of Melissa beamed from one frame, wearing the same luminous smile that Lucas had just mirrored on stage. Maxwell regarded it with misty eyes. "She'd have loved tonight," he said softly. "Seeing this house full of music, new memories, maybe it's finally healing." Seren observed him quietly, her heart aching with empathy. "Healing takes time," she said. "But you and Lucas are both on that path. Tonight was a big step." Lucas tugged at her sleeve. Miss Blake, do you think we can do a duet again sometime? I liked playing with you. She chuckled, ruffling his neatly styled hair. Absolutely. We'll find another piece that suits you. Maybe something cheerful this time. They drifted through the crowd, occasionally accepting congratulations or fielding questions about Lucas's budding musicianship. Seren felt a subtle shift in how the guests regarded her. No longer just the anonymous nanny, she was recognized as a key figure in Lucas's emotional renaissance. It felt both empowering and daunting. The last thing she wanted was for her relationship with Maxwell or even her role in the house to be misconstrued. Yet the closeness she felt, especially that potent moment of shared pride with Maxwell, was impossible to ignore. As the gala wound down to soft music and the last of the donors made their goodbyes, Lucas, exhausted from the emotional high, slumped in a chair. Serene coaxed him to rest, but the boy shook his head, determined to see the night through until Maxwell officially concluded the event. Near midnight, Maxwell took the microphone one last time, thanking everyone for their generosity. Pledges, he reported, had exceeded the previous year's totals by a significant margin. Cheers erupted, sparking applause and scattered toasts of champagne. Finally, guests began filtering out. The mansion slowly returned to a semblance of calm as staff cleared tables and collected decorations. Maxwell walked back to where Seren and Lucas waited, fatigue evident in his eyes but overshadowed by relief and contentment. "We did it," Lucas murmured, half asleep on his seat. "Mom's gala went okay, right?" Maxwell kneeled beside him, pulling him into a gentle hug. "It went wonderfully," he affirmed. "Thanks to you and Seren, and everyone who believed in the power of music." A small smile crossed Lucas's face before he drifted off, leaning his head against Maxwell's shoulder. Serene felt her own eyes grow misty at the tender picture. Maxwell looked up at her as though sharing the depth of his emotions in that glance alone. With surprising ease, Maxwell scooped Lucas up, carrying the boy's dozing form toward the stairs. Seren followed quietly, the hush of late-night corridors cocooning them. Upstairs in Lucas's bedroom, Maxwell laid the child gently on the bed, removing his little blazer and shoes so he could sleep comfortably. Seren slipped away to pour a glass of water for him, just in case he woke in the night. Finally, they stepped out into the hall, closing the door behind them. A subdued glow from the wall sconces revealed the weariness on both their faces and the powerful undercurrent of gratitude. Maxwell exhaled, pressing his back against the wallpaper. "Seren," he said softly, meeting her eyes. "I don't have the words. Tonight was... It was more than just a charity gala. It felt like a turning point for us. For me and Lucas. And for that, I can never thank you enough." She shook her head gently, stepping closer. "Lucas did most of the work. He found the courage in himself. I just nudged him." Maxwell's voice lowered, filled with sincerity. "He couldn't have done it alone, nor could I." He paused, his gaze sliding across her features with a quiet intensity. "You've given us a gift beyond measure." A trembling awareness shimmered between them. Seren's heart pounded, memories of the night flashing in her mind. Lucas's brave performance, the applause, Maxwell's prideful gaze. Well, it's been an honor to be part of it," she replied softly. They stood for a moment, words suspended. The long day, the swirl of emotions, and the closeness they'd formed all coalesced into a pulse of possibility. For an instant, Seren thought Maxwell might step forward, bridging the delicate space between them. But a distant sound of footsteps down the hall reminded them of the watchful house staff. Maxwell cleared his throat, straightening. "It's late," he murmured. "You must be exhausted. Get some rest. Tomorrow we'll talk. Maybe we can start planning the next piece for Lucas to learn." "Yes," she agreed, schooling her features into a professional calm. "Good night, Mr. Donovan." He offered a small, grateful smile. "Maxwell," he corrected gently. After all this, I'd prefer if you'd call me Maxwell." Her breath hitched, but she nodded, a faint smile curving her lips. "Good night, Maxwell." With that quiet exchange, she left him in the corridor, each step echoing in the hush. Behind her, Maxwell watched until she disappeared from view, his heart unexpectedly buoyed by a mixture of relief, triumph, and an undeniable yearning. In their wake, the mansion's grandeur felt warmer than ever, as though new life had been breathed into its marble halls. And somewhere, in the hush of night, the memory of Lucas's violin performance lingered, a testament to the power of shared hope, guided by gentle hearts. The morning after the gala felt like the calm after a storm, though, in this case, a storm of celebration rather than chaos. Sunlight poured through the windows, brighter than usual, illuminating motes of dust that floated lazily in the grand foyer. The staff, although tired from a late night of cleanup, moved with a buoyant energy. They whispered good-naturedly about the success of the event, the generous donations, and the sweet performance by young Lucas that had captured every heart. It was nearly mid-morning when Seren finally stepped out of her quarters. She had allowed herself a rare indulgence, sleeping in a bit longer. Still wearing comfortable attire rather than her usual neat slacks, she headed toward the kitchen, suspecting she might find a light breakfast or perhaps a cup of tea. She'd barely made it down the corridor when she noticed Marta, the housekeeper, bustling with an armful of linens. "Miss Seren," Marta called quietly, "I've just changed the linens in your room. Thought you might like fresh sheets after such a long night." Seren smiled, touched by the gesture. "Thank you, Marta. You didn't have to rush." "It's no trouble," Marta said kindly. Then, with a knowing wink, she added, "And congratulations on the gala. It seems to have gone splendidly. Everyone's talking about Master Lucas's violin piece, and about you, too." The remark brought a faint blush to Seren's cheeks. "He really did a wonderful job," she said softly, deflecting the part about herself. "I'm so proud of him." Marta's eyes glowed with maternal warmth. "He's lucky to have you here, both him and Mr. Donovan." And with that, she gave a small nod and carried on, leaving Seren to continue her path with the unspoken subtext lingering in the air. Entering the kitchen, Seren found only a couple of junior staff finishing up the last of the gala cleanup. She poured herself tea and settled by the window, letting the warm steam fill her senses while she replayed the night before. Lucas's brave notes, Maxwell's smile, the way he'd urged her to call him by his first name. Just recalling that private moment made her pulse flutter. She had to tread carefully. The line between her professional duties and the growing emotional connection with Maxwell was no longer clear. She reminded herself as she sipped her tea that her primary responsibility was Lucas's well-being. But was it so wrong to acknowledge that, in caring for the boy, she had also come to care for his father's struggles, his regrets, and the gentle kindness he tried so hard to hide? Her reverie broke when Lucas burst into the kitchen, hair disheveled from sleep. "Ms. Blake," he called brightly, "Dad said I can have the day off from lessons because I practice so much. Is that okay with you?" She laughed. "Of course, you deserve a rest after last night's big performance." Then, noticing his eager expression, she added, "Though if you want, we can do just a little play on the violin, purely for fun." He shook his head with a grin. "Nah, I'm good, but maybe tomorrow." Slumping into a chair, he yawned. "Dad wants to take me somewhere, but he wouldn't say where." "Somewhere?" Seren repeated, curiosity piqued. "Did he give you any hints?" Lucas just shrugged. "Nope. He said it's a surprise. I'm guessing maybe we'll go out for ice cream or something." Just then, Maxwell appeared in the doorway wearing a relaxed button-down shirt and khaki pants, a stark contrast to his usual business attire. His gaze settled first on Lucas, then on Seren, a friendly warmth in his eyes. "Morning," he greeted, nodding to them both. "I hope I'm not interrupting." "Not at all," Seren said, setting her teacup down. Lucas wriggled in his seat. "Dad, can you tell me now? Where are we going?" Maxwell chuckled, stepping further in. "Patience," he teased. Then, addressing Seren, "I was thinking, now that the gala has passed, maybe Lucas and I could use a father-son outing. And I realized something. Lucas hasn't been to the city's music hall since before his mother passed. There's a family-friendly matinee performance today, something light-hearted. I thought we might go." Lucas brightened, though a flicker of hesitation crept in. "You really want to go see music with me?" "Yes," Maxwell replied gently. "We've spent so much time making music here, I thought it might be fun to see professionals do it. No pressure, just enjoyment. But—" He paused, clearing his throat. "I'd also like you to come, Seren. If you're free, we could all make a day of it. Maybe get lunch outside the estate afterward." A surge of warmth filled Seren's chest. She wasn't sure if this was purely for Lucas's benefit or if Maxwell himself sought her companionship. Either way, she felt the invitation extend beyond simple duty. It was an acknowledgement of how integral she'd become. "That sounds lovely," she said, glancing between father and son, "if you both are sure you want me there." Lucas nearly bounced in his seat. "Yes, please come. Otherwise, it's just me and Dad. That's fine, but we'd miss you." That settled it. Serene couldn't resist the boy's hopeful grin. She agreed, and within the hour, the three of them were heading out in Maxwell's chauffeured car. The city's skyline shimmered as they approached, the sun reflecting off glass towers. Lucas pressed his nose to the window, marveling at the bustling streets below. It had been ages since he ventured beyond the estate, and excitement warred with a trace of nerves. The music hall, a stately structure with Grecian columns and an old-world facade, stood at the heart of the arts district. Maxwell escorted them inside, exchanging polite greetings with ushers who recognized him. Seren noticed on a hallway wall a plaque mentioning donors. Among them, Donovan Enterprises, a subtle reminder of Maxwell's philanthropic ties to the arts. They found their seats in a cozy row near the front, not too close to be overwhelming for Lucas, but near enough to appreciate the musicians. The lights dimmed, and a small chamber orchestra began playing a playful overture. Soft violin, bright clarinet, the gentle rumble of cellos, it all melded into a cheerful tapestry of sound. Serene could practically feel Lucas's heart thrumming with delight beside her. Maxwell, too, leaned forward slightly, his typical businesslike demeanor relaxed, eyes reflecting contentment he rarely showed. At intermission, they wandered the foyer, admiring posters of upcoming concerts. Lucas excitedly pointed out a youth orchestra advertisement, proclaiming someday he might play on that stage. Seren offered a proud smile, half joking that she'd be there to cheer him on. Maxwell, listening to their banter, felt his chest tighten with a surge of gratitude. This was the family life he'd once feared was lost forever. After the performance, the trio strolled a few blocks through the city streets, stopping at an inviting cafe with an outdoor terrace. Over plates of pasta and iced lemonade, Lucas animatedly recapped his favorite parts of the show, complete with dramatic reenactments of the conductor's baton flourishes. Passers-by occasionally glanced their way, drawn by the boy's exuberance, or perhaps by the striking sight of Maxwell Donovan, famed CEO, in such a casual, joyous mood. "We should do this again," Lucas declared between bites. "There's a bigger concert in a few weeks, maybe we can see that too?" Maxwell nodded, smiling. "I think that's a great idea, champ. We'll check the schedule." Serene glanced at them, heart brimming. The closeness they shared radiated warmth, and she felt a pang, wondering how it might evolve. Was she destined to remain a benevolent outsider, guiding them until Lucas was fully healed? Or might this fragile bond she shared with Maxwell deepen into something she was scarcely ready to define? The meal ended, and they wandered back to the car, content in an easy camaraderie. Lucas, growing drowsy from the excitement, nodded off once the vehicle started gliding through traffic. Maxwell, seated beside Seren with the boy's head cradled in his lap, lowered his voice so as not to wake him. "I can't recall the last time we had a day like this," he murmured. "Something so simple, yet meaningful. Thank you." Serene's eyes drifted to Lucas, peacefully asleep. "I should be thanking you for allowing me to see him in a new environment, for trusting me to be part of it." Maxwell's gaze met hers, unguarded and sincere. "You're more than just part of it, Seren. You've become important to him," he quickly added, though the look in his eyes suggested the feeling extended further. "I hope you know that." A moment passed, potent with mutual awareness. She exhaled slowly, a cautious flutter in her heart. "I'm glad," was all she said, but the softness in her tone conveyed deeper layers of emotion. Their conversation halted as the car turned into the estate's driveway. By the time they stepped out, Lucas stirred awake, blinking in confusion and then grinning at the sight of home. The staff greeted them at the entrance, gently inquiring if they'd enjoyed the outing. Maxwell handed off the keys, instructing someone to bring any parcels inside. Lucas trotted ahead toward the music room, claiming he just wanted to play one tiny melody before dinner. That left Maxwell and Seren alone for a moment in the driveway, the car pulling away behind them. The estate's facade glowed under the late afternoon sun, as if reflecting their collective sense of possibility. Maxwell turned to Seren, about to speak, when she caught him off guard by quietly saying, "He's come such a long way, both of you have." His eyes flickered with appreciation. "I couldn't have done it without you. Even after Melissa, I tried so hard, yet I just kept failing." He paused, the name of his late wife spoken gently now, without the same sharp edge of pain. "I was prepared to lose him, in a sense, to see him retreat forever. You changed that path." Serene felt her pulse hammer. The sunlight glinted off Maxwell's hair, and for a moment he looked younger, free from his usual burdens. "Lucas chose to come back," she insisted softly. "I only gave him another way to express himself." He nodded, stepping a fraction closer. "You're a humble teacher, Seren Blake, but your impact is profound." Then, that subtle note of caution drifted across his features, a reminder of constraints neither had voiced. I just want you to know I see that." She opened her mouth to reply, but Lucas's distant voice calling her name interrupted. Serene offered Maxwell a gentle, parting smile before turning to follow Lucas's shout, leaving Maxwell standing by the grand doors. He stuffed his hands into his pockets, heart heavy with a mixture of longing and gratitude that refused to recede. Inside, the day continued with its usual routines. Dinner was served. Lucas practiced a jaunty tune. Staff tidied and retired. But the undercurrent of something more remained, hovering in the household's quiet corners. Maxwell hovered on the brink of exploring emotions he had long buried. Seren, torn between her professional role and the attachments blossoming in her heart. That night, both father and Nanny found it harder to sleep, their minds replaying the city excursion, the gentle companionship of shared music, and the unspoken hope that perhaps, beneath the roles they played, they might find solace in each other's arms. The Donovan estate, grand and storied as it was, seemed to lean in, listening for the next tune in a melody that had only just begun. Morning light filtered through gauzy drapes in the Donovan estate, unveiling the dawn of a day both ordinary and extraordinary. On the surface, it seemed like any other morning, staff bustling softly through corridors, Lucas darting between rooms in search of a misplaced pencil, and Maxwell perusing financial summaries over coffee. But underneath the routine, an unspoken weight pressed on hearts, as though everyone sensed that change lingered on the horizon. Seren awoke feeling restless. She'd barely slept, haunted by half-remembered dreams of orchard strolls and lingering smiles in lamplit hallways. The comfort she drew from the household, particularly from Lucas's blossoming joy, merged seamlessly with the complicated warmth she felt whenever her gaze snagged on Maxwell. Rubbing the last vestiges of sleep from her eyes, she headed to the small practice room to tidy up the violins, certain Lucas would want a morning session. She found him already inside, bright-eyed despite the early hour, tightening the bow's hair with surprising skill. "Morning, Miss Blake," he chirped. "I wanted to try a new piece I found in a book. It's a bit fast, but maybe I can handle it." "That's ambitious," she teased, stepping over. "But I like your enthusiasm. Let's see if we can break it down into sections." They spent the next half hour working on the piece measure by measure. Lucas fumbled here and there, frustration momentarily clouding his determination. Seren calmly offered corrections, praising each small victory. By the time Maxwell appeared at the door, his tie only half knotted, the boy had managed a modest but confident run of the melody. "That sounded rather impressive," Maxwell remarked, leaning on the frame. "Good morning, both of you." Lucas's eyes lit up, spurred by paternal approval. "It's a bit tricky, Dad, but Ms. Blake said with practice I can get the notes smoother." "I have no doubt you will," Maxwell replied. He turned to Seren, a wry smile curling at the edge of his lips. "Your instructions have sparked a fire in him." She met his gaze, feeling that same gentle flutter in her chest. "He sparks his own fire, really. I just try to guide it." Before Maxwell could respond, an alert sounded from his phone. He excused himself to field a business call in the hallway. Lucas, not wanting to lose momentum, resumed practicing the tricky passage, determined to perfect it. Serene listened with one ear while tidying the music sheets, her thoughts drifting to Maxwell's recent kindness and the sense that something unspoken had grown between them. She was still musing when Maxwell returned, brow furrowed from the phone conversation. "Apologies," he said softly, glancing from Lucas to Seren. "I have a meeting in town this afternoon, something urgent about a merger. I'll be gone a few hours." Lucas's bow drooped. "Ah, we were hoping you'd join us for lunch." A hint of regret flashed in Maxwell's eyes. "I'm sorry, champ, work beckons, but—" He paused, exchanging a meaningful look with Seren. "When I get back, maybe we can have dinner in the orchard, if you'd like." Lucas brightened at once, stowing away the disappointment. "Yes, let's do that." Serene's stomach fluttered as well. The orchard had become a place full of significance. She gave Maxwell a grateful nod. "We'll look forward to it." Maxwell lingered momentarily, seemingly on the cusp of saying more, then offered a quick farewell to handle his corporate obligations. With his departure, the estate settled into a steady routine. Lucas focused on some academic work, occasionally darting back to the violin with unstoppable enthusiasm. Seren accompanied him for a short greenhouse visit, checking on the sprouting sunflowers they'd planted weeks earlier. Their green stems now stood a few inches tall, a tangible testament to growth and patience. By late afternoon, a mild breeze swept across the gardens. The staff prepared a simple yet elegant dinner setup near the orchard's wooden bench. White linens, a vase of fresh orchard blossoms, and softly glowing lanterns, nothing too formal, but distinct enough to mark the occasion as special. Lucas hovered around the orchard's edge, excitedly pointing out how the apples had begun to form on the branches in small green bulbs. When the roar of Maxwell's returning car finally broke the estate's hush, Lucas sprinted toward the driveway, practically dancing with delight. Seren followed at a more composed pace, though her heart thumped in anticipation. She found Maxwell stepping out, tie undone, jacket slung over one arm. He looked relieved to be back in the calm of the orchard after a grueling day in the corporate trenches. "Hey, champ," he greeted his son, ruffling the boy's hair. Then his gaze shifted to Seren, a faint but genuine smile showing lines of fatigue and contentment. "I hope I haven't kept you both waiting too long." Seren shook her head. "Not at all. We were just admiring the orchard. Everything's nearly ready for dinner." Lucas led the way through the rows of apple trees, his excitement weaving from subject to subject. How the orchard looked at dusk, how the sunflowers in the greenhouse were growing, and how he'd practiced a tricky piece that morning. Serene and Maxwell followed, exchanging glances whenever Lucas broke into tangential chatter. At last, they reached the simple table nestled near the bench. Sunlight angled low across the orchard, painting golden streaks on the grass. A gentle hush fell as they settled in. The meal was unhurried, each bite accompanied by conversation that ranged from music to gardening to glimpses of Maxwell's day, though he spared them any real details of the corporate drama, focusing instead on lighter anecdotes of city life. Halfway through the meal, Lucas politely excused himself, grinning as if he'd thought of something clever. Serene watched him dash off, presumably to fetch something from the house. Maybe a new drawing or the violin, she guessed. That left her alone with Maxwell in the quiet orchard, dappled sunlight turning the leaves overhead a vibrant green. They chatted idly about Lucas's progress and the house's calm after the gala, yet Serene noticed Maxwell's demeanor shift. He seemed contemplative, as if wrestling with thoughts beneath the surface. Eventually he exhaled and set down his glass. "There's something I've been meaning to say, or maybe ask," he ventured, his tone almost hesitant. She tilted her head, bracing herself for an unexpected question. "Yes?" He hesitated, eyes scanning the orchard's canopy. "First, let me say that I realize the role you've played here is invaluable, helping Lucas heal, teaching him to find his voice again. That was the priority, and you've excelled beyond measure, but in the process, you've become more to us." His gaze dropped back to her, unwavering. "More to me." Her heart thumped, a mixture of nerves and warmth. She could see the sincerity in his eyes, the flicker of vulnerability. "Maxwell," she began gently. He pressed on before his courage faltered. "I know there's a line. Employer, nanny, friend. I know what's at stake. But I also know that life is too fragile to ignore what's right in front of you, and you—" His voice grew quieter, filled with emotion. "You've shown me compassion, understanding, and hope that I thought I'd lost. I find myself wanting to be near you, to share more than just Lucas's music lessons." Serene's cheeks heated. "I feel it too," she admitted, voice trembling with honesty. "You and Lucas have become dear to me, not just as a job, but I've been worried about crossing boundaries, about complicating what we've built." He swallowed, relief and earnestness mingling on his face. "I respect that, and I'd never want to overshadow your dedication to Lucas. His well-being is paramount. I also respect any caution you might need. But if there's a path forward for us, together, I'd like to explore it." A swirl of confusion and yearning enveloped her. She recalled how her entire goal in coming here was to heal a wounded child, never expecting to confront her own heart's desires. Yet Maxwell's quiet strength and genuine kindness had become entwined with her daily life. She couldn't deny the longing that had blossomed with each shared glance, each orchard walk, each bedtime story where they'd both hovered in Lucas's doorway, forging a silent bond. Tears pricked at the corners of her eyes, not of sadness, but of immense tenderness. "I'm scared," she whispered, letting out the confession. "Scared of letting either of you down or somehow failing in my responsibilities. But I also can't pretend I don't feel strongly about both of you." His expression softened, an unspoken vow forming in the hush between them. Gently he reached across the table and grazed her fingertips. "We can take it slowly, step by step. You've already shown us what patience and love can do for Lucas. Maybe that same approach will guide us, if you're willing." Just then, Lucas's voice echoed from behind a row of trees. He emerged with the violin in hand, glancing back and forth between Serene and Maxwell. The atmosphere felt charged, but the boy, in all his youthful oblivion, just grinned. "Hey, do you guys want to hear something? I made up a short tune. "Well, I tried," he said, brandishing the instrument. Seren and Maxwell exchanged a look that brimmed with silent agreement. Maxwell cleared his throat, turning in his seat to face Lucas. "Of course, champ, let's hear it." Lucas positioned the violin against his shoulder. The first notes were uncertain but spirited, a sweet little melody that meandered like a gentle brook. He closed his eyes, channeling the confidence he'd built over weeks of lessons. Seren found her own eyes damp, touched by how far he'd come. When the boy finished, Maxwell applauded softly, inviting Lucas closer. "That was wonderful," he praised. "You're learning to compose your own music now, huh?" Lucas blushed, setting the violin aside. "I don't know if it's any good, but it felt nice to play." "It was beautiful," Seren said, her voice soft with emotion. She glanced at Maxwell, aware that they shared an undercurrent of deeper understanding. The orchard's gentle hush and the swirl of late-day sunlight conspired to seal this moment in time. Lucas bounced on his toes. "Maybe we can all play something together soon, like a real trio, you know? I bet Miss Blake can teach Dad too." He laughed, the notion both silly and somehow plausible. Maxwell shook his head with a good-natured grin. "Let's start with me learning how to hold the bow first." Then, turning to Seren, he let his gaze linger with quiet gratitude. "But if Ms. Blake's the teacher, I can't fail, can I?" Warmth radiated in Seren's chest as she recognized the subtle double meaning. In that hush, with Lucas humming an improvised tune, the orchard enveloped them in a fragile peace. Something had indeed shifted. The darkness that once clung to these grounds had receded, replaced by the promise of new growth, like the small green apples forming overhead or the sunflowers sprouting in the greenhouse. Nothing was certain. They would need open communication, humility, and the bravery to navigate uncharted emotional territory. But, as Lucas's bright eyes darted between them, brimming with boyish hope, and Maxwell's hand edged nearer to hers on the table, Seren felt a profound sense of rightness. The hush after heartbreak was ending, giving way to a melody that welcomed them all. And so, in the orchard where regret once lingered, father and son stood on the brink of a future illuminated by love and music, both guided and shared by a gentle-hearted nanny who'd taught them how to play through the pain and find the harmony within. If you enjoyed this story, don't miss the next one. Just click on the screen.